boys and girls. Welcome to another banging edition of a Lament Configuration podcast. I'm Greg Knox, and I'm joined by my old mucker from up north, Ria Fend.
Hello, Greg. Thank you for the very cockney intro there. I am back as resident Living Dead girl for a very appropriate to that description show.
That's right, because as promised on our last show, where we discuss zombie creeping flesh, we are talking about zombie video nasties on this show, aren't we?
Yes, much to my delight. I have very much enjoyed watching the films we're going to talk about today. And today we're going to take a trip into, of many places, a lovely place called Potter's Bluff.
Yes, and we're also taking a trip to somewhere that you know quite well.
Yeah, Manchester, my hometown. What could be more appropriate for the show?
Well, exactly. So, with that in mind, the first film that we're going to discuss on our zombie show today is a really, really good zombie film, I think. One with many, many alternative titles. This is The Living Dead at Manchester Morgue. Alternatively, and here we go, there's quite a lot of these, The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue. Very, very big difference there. Breakfast at the Manchester Morgue. Okay.
Not quite Breakfast at Tiffany's, is it?
No, it really isn't. Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, which I think is what it's known as in America. Don't Open the Window. And, most impressively, Zombie Free.
Okay. Well, this is actually one of my favourites. I do have it on DVD. I'm ecstatic to be talking about Manchester. It's a fantastic film and I highly recommend it. And upon watching it again, because I haven't watched it for a while, I absolutely loved it all over again. So glad that I own this film. So it's a 1974 film, and the description: a cop chases two hippies suspected of a series of Manson family-like murders. Unbeknownst to him, the real culprits are the living dead, brought to life with a thirst for human flesh by chemical pesticides being used by area farmers.
Yes, now this is a very interesting film for a number of reasons. First of all is that it's directed by Georges Grau, who is a Spaniard, and it stars Ray Lovelock, who is an Italian, Christina Galbo, who's a Spaniard, Arthur Kennedy, who's an American, and it features lots of Italian people in its sort of behind-the-scenes crew. One in particular that I wanted to mention is Gennetto De Rossi, who's the expert zombie makeup man from this period. He would work later on Zombie Flesh Eaters for Lucio Fulci and many of his films, so he's very, very good at what he does. But my point is, it's more that there's a lot of different nationalities going on here. It's a very weird mix.
Yeah, and I do think that Ray Lovelock got quite a lot of prestige, maybe not from this film, from some of his other films, but he was quite known for this film. He does seem, in this film, I think he is in his prime. He stands out in the film, a very great sort of underdog role, and sort of the unspoken hero. And yeah, I think it's a fantastic film. It's very well shot. It's very British. There's a lot of like amazing landscape and buildings in this film, and the beginning of it starts out really well. It's like starting in London in the city and then moving out to the countryside. So you get a lot of the London sights, lots of 70s cars and style. And yeah, in general, it's just a very well shot, very well put together and well acted film, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Now, interesting, because this is apparently the Manchester Morgue. As a Mancunian, you would obviously be the foremost authority on Manchester out of the two of us. Is this Manchester?
Well, no. It kind of looks like it's the Peak District and Lancashire or Yorkshire. But obviously a lot of the buildings and areas used in the show will have either been, the signs will have been covered up, or the buildings would have different uses or different names now. It does vaguely look like sort of the Snakes Pass or the Peak District area, so between Manchester and, say, Sheffield, or between Manchester and Yorkshire. So I think it's kind of out in the countryside, like there. It's does refer a lot to it being Windermere, so I think it might be near there.
From what I understand, they actually filmed a lot of this in Sheffield. So, yeah, very, very much not Manchester.
There you go. So I was right, bang on the button with that.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. So I think, and this is going to sound weird as English people, they used Manchester in the title because apparently that would be exotic.
Amazing. It's so funny that it's like between London and Manchester. So our star, Ray Lovelock, he's like seen as a city boy going to the country. Yeah, indeed, he goes from London, goes for a quiet getaway to the country. He's travelling to Sheffield, but they call it Manchester. And it's just quite funny that those are my two worlds, and I can totally kind of relate to that. And those stereotypes of what they say about city dwellers going out to the country and, you know, being dressed inappropriately for the country and with all his fancy, trendy clothes and stuff. It's kind of still the same world, really, as what it was back then. So it's still relatable and very funny.
Yeah, now one thing that I thought was quite interesting is for what is definitely not an English film, they've actually made some kind of effort to dub people into like regional British accents. So Ray Lovelock's character George, he's got way governor sort of core blimey, he's a cockney of some description, and then you've got all these people who have got these northern accents, so they all talk like that for the most part because it's clearly Yorkshire.
I love it. It's just so funny. It's so broad and like it's just hilarious. Even if you're from there and you hear that all the time, you just can't help but laugh at the way that they've phrased some of these things. So yeah, it is very British, but actually the way the film has been made, it does kind of have, like you say, a European film to it, or Italian, or maybe slightly Americanized. It doesn't feel like it's shot in kind of a British way, but it's been shot in Britain, and you've got all of these local dialects floating around in it.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, to me, it kind of felt very similar to how I would imagine sort of people in the north of England spoke in the 70s. It's like, especially when they're talking about near the beginning of the film, one of my favourite scenes is where the main female character, Edna, she's attacked by a zombie, the zombie with the red eyes, the very iconic zombie in this film. And a local said, "Oh, that's just Guthrie the Loony."
Love it. It's so cool. Like, what a great name. And the fact that she's called Edna. I mean, that's such an old-timey British name. It's like someone's nana would be called. It's it's kind of cute, really, that, you know, all of these stereotypes are there, because it is kind of close to real life, but it's also quite stereotypical, so it's quite funny as well. It does feel very quaint and, like a caricature of what it would be, really, but it's not a million miles away from real life in Britain if you're listening to this from somewhere else in the world, because I know a lot of our listeners are in America and other parts of Europe.
Yeah, so one part that did make me laugh is right near the beginning, where there's this Edna is going for petrol, and it's only £3. I'm like, fucking hell, I would love for petrol to be £3 now.
And he's like, it'll be £3 that will. And she's like, I'm sorry. And he's like, £3, love. And she's like, oh, right, okay, British pounds. What's a quid? No, she doesn't actually say that. I threw that in there, but you can see the wheels, the cogs turning in her mind. What's a quid?
Yeah, now, again, relating to the location, I thought the cinematography in this was really good. I thought it really captured sort of the English countryside and the hillside sort of the area. I thought it was great.
Yeah, fantastic. Really great close-up shots of the actors and actresses in this. Actually, really great acting on the whole. Even the zombies, they've really gone to some trouble with it. And although it can be quite funny at times with the zombie acting, I felt that they went to such an effort with it, and it did seem quite real including the older lady that they had. They didn't just, they'd carefully selected them and they had characters of their own, which I thought was awesome. And some of the close-up shots and the cinematography that they had with those characters really helped to deliver that. And yeah, it kind of made me fall ever so slightly in love with Ray Lovelock, who I then looked up and he has sadly passed away. He would have been an old man now, but yeah, I did have a look and I was just like, this guy must have been like so popular back then, because he's fantastic in this film. And he's got like a really great leading actor look for it.
Yeah, so because he's Italian, obviously he's going to appear in a lot of Italian genre films in particular. There's ones that are notable to me are, guess what, Giallo. So he's in a couple of those that are quite notable. One's called Autopsy, which is a very underrated Giallo. Really like that one.
I haven't seen this, so I definitely need to get this on the to-watch list.
And a less good Giallo, which is actually directed by Lucio Fulci, who's the subject of our next show, which is called Murder Rock, which is set in like a dancing school, but it's almost like a disco dancing school, which is, yeah, it's a very, very kind of cheesy sort of mid-80s film. It's, yeah, it's kind of worth a look if you like cheesy stuff, but otherwise not. But yeah, no, I agree with what you've said. Definitely, he's definitely got a good look, and yeah, as you said, he unfortunately did pass away last year, which sucks clearly.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't look. He doesn't have sort of a outwardly Italian look in this film. It might be the way they've styled and dressed him, but I couldn't really tell that. You can kind of tell that it's dubbed, but it's all done very well. So. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I absolutely love this film, and I did think that the acting was amazing. Considering how dated the film should be, it's still fantastic, and probably a lot better than some of the zombie flicks that we get coming out these days. I mean, it's classic. Back then, it would have been highly original. The plot is excellent. And it's just very well rounded, and the whole sort of satanic thing that they had in there as kind of a spanner in the works to throw the policeman off the scent. I thought that fitted very well, and the landscapes and, like say, cinematography are just beautiful. So fantastic all round.
Yes, this is quite interesting in terms of when it actually comes out. So this is post Night of the Living Dead, but pre Dawn of the Dead. So a lot of kind of cliches that we get with zombie films. I mean, let's look at Zombie Creeping Flesh as an example. It's actually got a very similar plot to this in a lot of ways, where you have some kind of secret government experiment going on, which leads to zombies. So yeah, so this is kind of one of the first films that I'm aware of that has that plot device. And the way they do it in this film, I think, is actually very clever, because I think obviously what the director's trying to do is it's trying to do like a pro-environmental message.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and very well delivered it is too. So I thought like the morals and the characters and the structure of the whole thing kept you interested in the film. It kept you engaged. It didn't give too much away. It wasn't too obvious, but like I say, it does feel like a traditional zombie film, like one of the essentials to watch if you're a fan of that genre. In my opinion, I feel like this is one of my favourites. So.
Yeah, and this may possibly be influential on Dawn of the Dead, because it is one of those films where there's some kind of nuclear disaster, or there's a secret government experiment that goes awry, and then there's a zombie breakout. So look at Return of the Living Dead, for example, which is a pretty big example of that kind of zombie film.
Yeah.
So yeah, very influential.
I love the fact that they wrote in, they had this traditional Gothic British churchyard and graveyard and tombs, and then they had the hospital with the hospital morgue, and a lot of the plot revolved around that, and I felt like it gave it such great scope for the cinematography, especially the graveyard. And one interesting thing about the zombies is that they essentially have really superhuman strength. Which does give them this sort of edge where they can do anything they want, really, and they can sort of destroy people in that way. And how they sort of got rid of them, they figured out that they could burn them and that would destroy them, does give it this kind of satanic vibe and very evil angle on how to get rid of them. And yeah, I mean, just visually, just a very grim and effective thing to have on screen is some living dead being burnt to death again. You know, it's just quite chaotic, dark, and interesting. So very much enjoyed those aspects of what kind of zombies they are, because there's always different ways that you can take that.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting in that the different zombie films that we've talked about thus far and the ones that we're going to talk about on this show, they all have very different ways that you can get rid of a zombie. So in Zombie Creeping Flesh, it's the stereotypical you have to shoot them in the head. In this film, there isn't any of that. You just seem to have to set them on fire, and that's it. That's how you get rid of them. So again, it's pre kind of mid 2000s where all zombie films became homogenized and they're all basically the same. It's quite interesting where you've got zombies, but there isn't one sort of tried and true tested zombie, although zombies like this are actually kind of my preferred choice, because first of all, they look awesome. They're very, very heavily decayed. They're slow and shaggy and things like that. They don't run.
Yeah,
which,
you can shoot them and they just get back up again.
Yep, exactly. And I just thought, again, bigging up the zombie makeup, they just look really awesome. They're not my favourite sort of zombies, because we're going to come to that on the next show, but in terms of sort of zombies out there, I think they're pretty much, definitely up there with the best zombies. And yeah, they're very, very threatening, and they make very awesome noises as well. So one of the things I was going to say is the ADR, the soundtrack on this, in terms of when the zombies are around, the sounds they make is really good.
Yeah, it's awesome. And there's kind of like, I think like a high-pitched, high-frequency sound resonating from the machine. So that's kind of your warning when this kind of activity is going to happen. And then you also get this kind of heart fluttering sound, like you would listen to someone's heartbeat through the monitor if you're at a hospital, like a bit of that as well. So it's all kind of mixed in, and it's very effective.
Yeah, and I like how, like you mentioned, they're basically nuclear-powered super zombies because, like you said, they've got super strength. So they can throw, like, tombstones with ease.
Yeah, exactly. It's really cool, and it's done so well. Obviously, they're not real tombstones, but it's difficult to see the difference. So for me, that's close enough. And didn't you just love the old lady in the churchyard? I just thought she was incredible.
Yeah, that was probably my favourite scene in the whole film, actually. So my take on the film is that I really like the film. The first half of the film is actually quite slow and not really a lot happens. It's a lot of character development and kind of showing you kind of like, this is where the plot's going to go. You've got this character, this character, this character. Introducing us to Guthrie the Loony and people like that.
Setting up a love interest there, which is always a good thing to tie in, I guess. You've got that kind of emotional attachment with that. Two strangers who meet, and then he ends up being the hero and rescuing the girl, and she starts to fall for him.
I didn't pick up on that personally. I would say feminists probably wouldn't like this film because it's a woman who constantly has to be rescued by a man.
I think that it's building an emotional connection with the viewer, and she kind of, she needs him to help her through this crisis, and they build this connection from that. So I just saw that they were probably getting together. Quite a nice story, They were kind of thrown together under the circumstances, but got along really well.
Yeah. So that builds up to halfway through the film where we have this awesome scene in the cemetery where you've got our man Guthrie, who to me, I don't know about you, definitely looks like Treguard from Nightmare.
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, anybody who makes a tramp the first zombie, and like tramp zombie is the one that starts the whole epidemic, I mean, I think that's an awesome concept in itself. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, and you got the old woman zombie, and you've got a couple of other zombies in there as well.
I love her. She's like my hero. What fantastic acting. Especially like when they killed her off, like she was the one that you can visibly see burning in a fire. And it's like, wow, it's actually really quite convincing. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, if you're going to be in a zombie movie, that's the type of zombie that you want to be.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, that's life goals right there.
Yes. Yeah, appear in a zombie movie.
Sign me up for when I'm 78.
That is an awesome life goal. We should definitely do that. But I really like, just going back to the scene itself, I really like the atmosphere in the scene. So the film, I mean, is the better films that we're going to talk about in the show today. One of the positives that they both have going for them is the atmosphere. The atmosphere is really great. I love the use of fog and things like that to build up sort of tension and atmosphere. And the fact that the zombies, although they are very slow, they are, because they're so strong, you know that they can fuck people up, you know, should they be given the chance to.
Yeah. And like location-wise, like I said, I really love the choices of what they've done and some of the cars that they've used and the countryside. It's just, fantastic setting for everything. It really works.
Definitely. And around this point, the death count, which is only 1 in the first half of the film, really ramps up.
Yeah, I mean, I counted 15. I think we got 15.
Yeah, so I got sort of a similar number to that. And to me, like, the best deaths in the film are the policeman, who is Craig. That's his name, apparently, where he, in true sort of zombie film style, gets his insides ripped open and the zombies then munch on his guts.
Yeah, that is pretty epic. He kind of throws himself under the bus, so to speak, tries to make a hero and sacrifices himself for the group. And it doesn't end well.
No, and in terms of the actual effects themselves, as I said, they're really, really good. It's sort of for 1974, I believe, is when this film came out. They're sort of very, very realistic in terms of what you get. Because believe me, I've seen a lot of people getting their guts ripped out in films, and a lot of the time it just looks really rubbery and shit.
Yeah, I think that is one of the best deaths. Besides that, of the 15, I like the scantily clad zombie in just bandages on the stairs.
Yeah, which is really near the end. So I think he gets reanimated kind of in the mortuary itself, which is why he's sort of covered in all these bandages. So he looks absolutely hilarious. And
he's got like a full-on chest scar, which is quite detailed. And he's basically wearing nothing but bandages tied around his area and around his head. And I mean, it's quite interesting. He is an excellent zombie. I did find myself kind of quite liking some of the zombie characters, the way that they kill people or eat people, or, you know, hit them or do something to them first. And then the way that they get killed off or defeated as well. So, like I say, I really love the old lady who gets burnt. That's amazing. This guy in the bandages, and the introduction of like the babies as zombies who bite. I thought that was really cool. Great idea. And they had like theories to back all this up, which was also very well thought out. You know, not like absolutely perfect, but makes sense enough for you to kind of be engrossed in it and believe it with the plot. The receptionist was quite an interesting death.
Yeah, so I really liked the receptionist death as well because of how brutal it was. It was, proper like ripping of guts and limbs and stuff like that. It was just very, very brutal.
Yeah, and they kind of just had an excuse to undress her as well, which we always expect in horror films, but yeah.
Well, yes, it kind of goes with the territory, as we kind of say every single time, really. It's like, well, it was the mid-70s, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did find the baby zombies interesting as well. I forgot about that, because I've seen this film before, and I thought the babies being kind of, you know, really aggressive, I thought that was going to play more of a part in the story, but it never did. It was just something that sort of came up and was just a passing thing, which I thought was a bit disappointing, because, I mean, as I said, back then you probably could get away with, like, killing a baby that was a zombie.
Yeah, and I wonder if Brain Dead plays into that at any point, because, you know, the potential for zombie babies was there, and then they did use that in Brain Dead, but not in this film. No. Maybe it's slightly too comedy for this film.
No, now it's interesting because you mentioned comedy. Now, I've seen reviews where they say that one of the strengths of the film is that it's very straight and it's quite serious. But I actually thought there were a couple of moments of black comedy in there. Like, so for example, there's one scene where George is arguing with the government officials where they are, trying to operate the machine, and he keeps sort of turning off and trying to break it. And he says something along the lines of, well, that I'm not here attacking you, or something like that, which I thought was, that's going to come into something sort of later on, like he's going to turn into a zombie, but that never happened.
I thought he was going to turn into a zombie from the baby bites as well, but that didn't happen. But yeah, I mean, I do think that this is really strong because it's played straight, and I think it is incredibly hard to write and accomplish a straight horror. Like, it's always so tempting to put humour in there to lighten it up. But it's done very well, and maybe there are a couple of moments of dark humour, but not that much. Another location that I really loved was the Owl Hotel. With the
actual owl in it, which I thought was, clearly this, again, was a very, very sort of 70s weird European touch, because no one would ever do this now.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, and you do kind of get that coming across, that there are a lot of old-fashioned 70s views, not very PC at that, but one of the characters that I really love was that hotel owner, who was kind of quite a witchy vibe to her, or maybe like like a palm reader sort of character. She had that sort of feel to it.
Yeah, she's sort of a dotty, eccentric old woman, sort of, yeah.
Yeah, one of those types of very sort of floaty kimono, but kind of a bit of a dark twist, and she had her familiar, which is an old owl. So it did kind of have that sort of witchy vibe to it, which I really liked. Very intriguing and mysterious.
Yeah, so in terms of when you mentioned the old-fashioned views, so this is sort of tying into more of the story itself. So there's a police sergeant who is Sergeant McCormick, who's Irish. So he talks with an Irish accent like that. Garbled Irish accent on my part. Apologies to any Irish listeners. I've completely butchered your accent there. But yeah, so he's given that kind of accent, and he's very much similar to Carlson, I thought, in Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker. He's this kind of very sort of I'm trying to think of the right word to use here, but he's very much an old school, very sort of hates kind of young people, hates hippies, very, very right wing, very tough. But he's not a cartoon character again. He's very, very sincere in his views. He thinks that they're right.
Yeah, he does. And he criticises our lead character's clothing, doesn't he?
Yes, he doesn't like his long hair, and he doesn't like his clothes, and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you need to watch the film to find out, basically, because I don't even feel we can approach that on the show.
No, it is a great quote, I'm not gonna lie, but we're not gonna try and read it out.
Yeah, we'll stay clear of that one.
No. And just a kind of quick spoiler warning. So if you've never seen this film and you don't want to know what happens at the end, just skip the next 5 minutes or so. Because it's the 70s, you get a lot of kind of downbeat endings. Although, again, going back to Butch and Baker Nightmare Maker, where they kind of tried to wrap things up in a very tidy little bow, in that sort of all the characters you like live and all the characters you didn't like died. This one, it does a similar thing, but it does it in a slightly more nihilistic but more kind of true to the story way, I thought.
Yeah, I agree, yeah. And I think a common theme for the 3 films that we're going to cover in this show is that they all have these very un-PC views, which we'd never be able to put into films these days. But of that era, it was very present. So they're all kind of similar in that sense.
But in terms of the ending, what did you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, not upbeat, and there was a trend for doing that at the time, so why not? Why not be a little downbeat?
Yeah, so for anyone who hasn't seen the film, what happens is that, our 2 lead characters, they both die sort of at the end of the film. So Edna kind of, has to be rescued one time too many, gets turned into a zombie, because I assume she dies and they turn her into one. And then George has to sort of burn her, which is the way of dealing with zombies in this film. So she gets fully immolated, which is a great word. I love that word. And then what happens is, because the police think that Edna and George are Satanists and they're the ones committing all these murders, which clearly they're not. But again, they're the police. They're not to know these things. And he, again, is very, very forthright in his opinion that, well, it's clearly George. So, yeah, any excuse, he will shoot George. So he shoots him several times dead. But then, at the end of the film, George actually comes back as a zombie. And then he gets his own back,
which is
pretty
great.
Cool.
I mean, and he is a kind of, the hero of the film, and he remains that way. I guess a little bit like Evil Dead, really. But the main thing is with the ending is that even though it is downbeat, you still feel satisfied that he gets his own back. Unfortunately, they're wrongly accused, and the authorities do not understand what's going on. And the main point of that is that it's left wide open for a sequel because they don't understand what's going on. And then it ends there, and we've got zombies still present. So for me, it was wide open for a sequel.
Yeah, they could have done like a Return of the Living Dead style and just, where they don't contain the problem. So in theory, there could be loads of zombies that come afterwards, but they just don't. So unfortunately, that didn't happen. I'm not really sure why, because as I said, this at the time and even now is a very, very cult movie. This is, I think, one of the most fondly remembered zombie films from the 70s, and with good reason, because it's very good.
Agree, yeah, fantastic. So overall, highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's a pretty good story. It's got sort of good characters. They're not absolutely amazing characters, but they're pretty good. The acting is quite good for this type of film. The story's excellent. The zombie effects are excellent. It's got quite good pacing. So it's, as I mentioned, I found it a bit slow going for the first half, but then from the scene in the cemetery onwards, it sort of really, really kicked into high gear, which is sort of the way you want to do it. And really, really enjoyed it. Key question though, is it a video nasty? So Ria, I'll start with you.
I'm going to say no, because there was nothing too extreme for me. I felt like it was all within reason. Yeah,
pretty much the same. So everyone knows that I'm kind of the hardest one to repulse on the show. And this one, there's some gore, and that's it, really. It's nothing different from what you would get now. I mean, nowadays, you'd probably even get worse gore than this, I imagine, in zombie films.
Yeah, for sure, totally. We've, obviously become more immune to it, and we've seen it all, so what was shocking then isn't as shocking now. We can sort of, on the whole, as people, we can take more. So, yeah, it's not all that shocking, really.
No, but it's a very, very good film. So if you're a fan of this, or if you want to check it out, it's available on DVD from Studio Canal, which is the version that I own. And you said you own this as well on DVD?
Yes, so I do own this on DVD also, and it's the Blue Underground version.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so we own two different versions of the same film. So you must own like an older version compared to the one I do.
I've had this a really long time. I was very excited to get it because it was the first time I watched it. I knew it was going to be good, so I bought it on DVD. And it's like a 2-disc special edition one with extra features, so I was very happy to purchase that.
Yeah, as am I. So yeah, buy it. It's really good.
Agree.
So, the next film on our Video Nasties with zombies is a very different type of zombie film. In fact, calling the, this is a weird film to have to talk about, because this is sort of closer to something like the traditional Haitian zombie, where it's not literally sort of decaying zombies sort of wandering around and shuffling around. This is sort of a very, very different type of film involving the reanimated dead, shall we say, and it's called Dead and Buried. It's directed by Gary A. Sherman, who previously directed a film called Deathline, which is a very, very good British horror film from the 70s, and Poltergeist 3.
Yeah. Well, I must say that this has always been on my list of films to watch, and it's been recommended to me before, but I never got a chance to watch it. Then when I knew we were going to cover it on the show, I left my first watch for our review. So I'm very happy that I've now watched it. I thought it was awesome. So we're just skipping ahead now to 1981, Dead and Buried. And the synopsis is a suspense horror film set in a small coastal town called Potter's Bluff, where after a series of gory murders committed by mobs of townspeople against visiting tourists, the corpses begin to come back to life.
Yes, now this is a very, very curious entry on the Video Nasties list, because this definitely has the feel of what would have been in 1981 a mainstream horror film. So it's very, very polished. It's very, very well directed. It's got great production values. Yeah, it's almost thinking like, why is this on the list?
Me too. And I felt like this had a really weird vibe with this kind of location, this small town feel to it, where everybody in the town is kind of in on this whole what's going on with the killing of tourists thing. It had this kind of Twin Peaks-esque type feel to it, which I really liked, and maybe even where inspiration for League of Gentlemen may have come from, because it had that very local vibe to it, where if you enter the town as an outsider, you're probably going to get bumped off. So
I can definitely imagine now, sort of in this film, we'll have no trouble here.
This is a local place for local people.
Yes, and that's very, very true in this film. Now, it's quite interesting that you say that. What I got were similarities to The Fog by John Carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
It's, again, very, very similar in terms of there's lots of fog, and you've got huge groups of people sort of doing the killing. So it's not one person, it's like a whole mass of people.
Mm-hmm.
But also, and you may agree with this, you may not, I got kind of Stephen King-y vibes. So in a lot of Stephen King books and films, they're all set in very sleepy small towns like this. So I call this small town with a secret style films. So something like Salem's Lot, or even something like It in a way.
Definitely It, yeah. I did kind of get that sort of feel from it. And a lot of the characters were really quite well developed. The acting is fantastic in this. I really liked the sheriff in this film. I really liked the mortician, the sort of villainess type character, Dodds. I really liked the sort of the suburban sort of Stepford Wives sort of feel of some of the women in this. Like they were like quite robotic and quite retro, like some of quite 50s styling. That's another reason it reminded me of Twin Peaks. You had a cafe that was very much like a diner. You had a local petrol station or gas station, as they say. And if I can quote from League of Gentlemen, they even have a burning at the beginning. So we didn't burn him would be very appropriate for me to say.
Oh God, yeah, and yeah, I get Lynch vibes as well. So it's got this feel of, I think it's supposed to be set in the present day, but I mean, we've kind of spoilt the film already. Just by calling it a zombie film is sort of a spoiler anyway. So, hey, fuck it. We may as well go whole hog with it. So, Dobbs, who is great. He's the best character in the film, by the way. Incidentally, it's quite funny because the actor who plays him, who's Jack Albertson, he plays the granddad in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So it's quite weird seeing him go from that to this, because they're very, very different, but he plays it really, really well. He is definitely the best character in the film, in my opinion, by miles.
Oh, I loved it. They made him really creepy. They made him have like great motives. They made him quite eccentric. There's some excellent twists at the end. And yeah, I mean, the way that he works, the meticulous way that he works, the music that they played whilst he's working is just absolutely fantastic. Really brings something to this film, makes it very, very creepy.
Yeah, but when I was talking about Lynch, so yeah, you got Twin Peaks, but you also have like Blue Velvet, and you have Wild at Heart, and films like that, which are essentially modern day, but it has a feel of the 50s or the past. So they're trying to preserve this, small town Americana from days gone by feel. So, like you mentioned, sort of the Stepford Wives, but there's also things like Invasions of the Body Snatchers, which again sort of casts a bit of a shadow over this, particularly the remake, which have come out not that long before this.
Yeah.
And yeah, the idea of, even Get Out in a lot of ways is sort of quite similar to this. It's got this same feeling of you're taking a person, you're killing them, or you're basically changing them so that they've now got a different personality.
Yeah, it's just great. I really enjoyed this. It's definitely gone on my to recommend list, and to me, it's a classic. I think everybody should watch this if you love horror.
Yeah, so this film is very, very underrated. Like, apart from it being a video nasty, not a lot of people have really heard of this, which is a bit of a shame because it's not one of these films which is kind of out there and, lots of people have seen it. I'm not saying it's the greatest horror film from the early 80s because it really isn't, but it's really, really good. And it's got a lot of atmosphere to it, again, because of the small town feel, because it's set on it's on the coastline, so there's a beach, so there's a lot of fog, and, the feel of sort of this whole town that are literally against any outsiders. And just to kind of move into sort of individual sort of death scenes for a minute, literally the first 5 minutes of this film is so awesome, because if you've never seen this film before, fuck, even if you had seen it before like me and you just forgot what happened, it sort of really, really pulls the rug out from under you, because what happens is you've got this guy taking pictures and, there's this attractive woman on the beach and sort of they start flirting with each other and, he's sort of like, oh, I'm sure this happened to you before, Ria, but like, hey, can I take pictures of you? And then, they start taking pictures and he says, this is going to go into Playboy. And I'm like, well, she's not naked. And then she gets her tits out and it's like, oh, okay, so it probably could go into Playboy. And you're thinking like, okay, where's this going? And then all these people appear and they beat the shit out of him and they set him on fire. And I'm like, fuck.
Amazing. You're like, what? I did not see that going there. And she plays it perfectly as well. I think she is awesome. And then you see this sinister character who looks like she's wearing a diner dress. And then that comes into play later and it all starts to add up. And I just think it's set up really well. They then plant his body into a car wreck, which is fascinating as well, after they've burnt him. And then the most shocking part of the film is where they reveal his face in the car wreck and it's stripped away with like an exposed jaw and an exposed eye. And that scene alone in the whole film is amazing. And the way that they've set that up, the prosthetics that they've used or whatever back then, is just fantastic. Can't fault it. Still stands up now. So that scene in it, for me, absolutely made it, along with Dodds' character and our sheriff, who is trying to figure out what the hell is going on all the way through. I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah, so the effects work in this is done by Stan Winston, who's one of the greatest kind of people in special effects of all time. Obviously, he's best known for doing the effects in stuff like American Werewolf in London and Terminator 2, stuff like that. So he's definitely one of the most foremost kind of special effects people. And yeah, the special effects, with maybe one exception, are all awesome in this film. They look great. Even stuff that you wouldn't think of as a special effect is a special effect. So that character that that got burned, George, he at one point, one of the best deaths in the film, one of the most vicious ones especially, is him lying in a hospital bed completely covered in bandages. Yeah. And he's only got an eye showing, and the same woman from earlier turns up as a nurse and stabs him in the eye with a needle. Now that wasn't an actor, that was a dummy, but you wouldn't know that because, again, the effects work is so good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Really love that scene and idea as well. It's really unexpected and fantastic. And again, she plays it so well. I thought she was fantastic. One of my favourite characters in the film. What's the exception to the special effects? Did you see something that was particularly ropey in this film that you want to mention?
Well, from reading up on IMDb and places like that, there's a death near the end of the film, which is of a doctor. And what they do is it's this very, very vicious death. So he's one of the only kind of I don't know, this is, before I go on, do we call them zombies? Because are they zombies? Really?
Kind of, because they're like dead but reanimated, so I guess they are. I guess it's more like Frankenstein if you think about it. So
Yeah,
it kind of is zombies.
or it's sort of similar, like I said, to the Haitian zombie. So when you're talking about that, you're talking about films like White Zombie or I Walked with a Zombie, or even something like The Serpent and the Rainbow by Wes Craven, where it's the idea of it's not literally a dead person who's then decomposed and been brought back to life. It's someone who appears dead, who is under the will of like a master, which is what happens in this film. So it's kind of
Yeah.
more like that. But I suppose for the sake of argument, I suppose we'll call them zombies.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so the zombies kind of turn up and they inject acid into this guy's head, and his head starts sort of decomposing from the inside.
Yeah.
Now, that looked a little bit rubbery, but apparently
Yeah.
Stan Winston didn't do that effect. Apparently someone else did it. So
that would be why then. I guess.
that would be why it looks a bit different from sort of all the others. But
yeah.
it's still very, very effective, I thought.
Yeah, it was very good. That one was a little disappointing. Overall, I think I got 5 deaths, but possibly 8 if you count some that might have been off screen. So it's the death count isn't that high, but every death is done particularly well and does definitely count, very much so. So, yeah, I mean, overall, fantastic film. Loved it.
Yeah, I think my favourite scene in the whole film, I don't know about you, apart from kind of the last sort of 10 minutes, which is just awesome, and the first 5 minutes, which I say is awesome, in between that, it's probably where you've got a family who turn up and they're being chased by the townspeople, and it's just before they chase them, it's where the family are in this empty house for some reason, I don't know why, and they're kind of looking through the window at them, and you can see the shadows of these townspeople in the window behind them. And as I said, it's very foggy, it's very dark, so it's got a lot of atmosphere.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, that was very good. In the house, I personally loved all the mortician scenes with Dodds, with the old record player. It gave me a really sort of trying to think what kind of vibe you would get from that.
Well, it's like big band, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But then even maybe some sort of Seven vibes to it, where like you have someone who's very meticulous at work, and you get this kind of dark underlying undertone, but you're not really sure what's going on for real. So I enjoyed those scenes watching him work. There's one particular scene where he strips back all of the flesh and rebuilds somebody. It's very detailed. It's pretty, awesome to look at. And besides that, like I say, the car wreck reveal at the beginning, the beach scene, and the drunken guy in the shipyard, those are all really great scenes as well. Definitely a lot of atmosphere.
Yeah, and I'm kind of making it sound like the deaths are the only kind of good things that happen in the film. It's not true. If you've never seen this film before, there's a great mystery element as to what's really going on, because what we're talking about in terms of like all the townspeople are dead, that's obvious. That's kind of pretty clear that must be what's happening. And the main character, our sheriff, he doesn't realise that. So it's not really a spoiler to say that, but what I will say is that, the last 10 minutes or so is really awesome, and I don't want to give too much away about it because I don't want to diminish the power of it from anyone who hasn't seen it, but that was, again, a really, really great ending. It's probably, of the video Nasties, it's probably one of my favourite endings.
Yeah, it's actually a fantastic ending. Loved it. Was very surprised as well. There's one final reveal that I didn't quite see coming, and I was like, brilliant, so great.
Yeah, exactly. So, like Ria said, great film. Definitely worth seeing if you haven't seen it before. I would highly recommend it. Not sure why it's not more widely known, but hey, Also, speaking of kind of video nasties, apart from deaths, which are sort of very, very vicious, I'm really not sure why this is a video nasty, because it's really not sleazy at all, or nasty, or disreputable, or any of that kind of shit. So I'm going to say it's not a video nasty at all.
Yeah, I'm going to say that probably the reveal of the face in the car wreck might have shocked them at the time, and that is quite vicious, and the stripping back of the skin in the morgue. But for me, not a video nasty, not in this day and age now. not sure how much they would have been shocked back then, but still, yeah, it feels a little tame for me, so I'm going to say no.
So if you want to get this film, which I do, because I don't have it, it's definitely one of probably the best video nasties that we've talked about in this series, in my opinion. It is available from a company called Icon Home Entertainment. So yeah, if you want to buy it on DVD, that's the way to do it. It comes with high recommendations from both myself and Ria.
And it says on this poster that I've got from way back when, it says the creators of Alien bring you this film, so I don't know how true that is or...
Well, that's kind of an interesting thing to end on. So one of the writers is credited as Dan O'Bannon, who is the writer of Alien. And, you know, he's a great sort of genre writer. He's sort of one of the best genre screenwriters sort of in history because, yeah, he wrote Aliens. So pretty much you can't really get much better than that, really. Although, according to him, apparently he didn't actually have anything to do with this. His name was just on the credits just for publicity purposes. It was actually written by the other writer.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so that's where that comes from.
Maybe he gave it a proofread or something.
Who knows? It's quite interesting how screenwriting worked back then. So back then, sort of, you know, people would, like you say, touch up other people's sort of scripts and not really get any credit, or they'd get hidden credit, or they'd get points and stuff like that. So yeah, who knows? Like the movie industry is a very, very weird place. Glad I'm not in it. I just talk about films. I have no aspirations to have anything to do with the business itself because it's full of cunts.
Well, yeah, I mean, from all of the latest news being revealed about that industry, we can completely agree with that. Why I am now entering it is anyone's guess, but hey, if you love movies like me, then why not give it a go? Just got to be aware of those see you next Tuesdays.
Wow. And speaking of giving it a go, our final film that we're going to talk about on the show today is a film called Forest of Fear, which has the alternative titles of Blood Butchers, Blood Eaters, and the version that we watch, Toxic Zombies. Although in the UK it's called Forest of Fear, so that's what we're going to refer to it as from now on. This is directed by Charles McCran, who this is the only film that he ever made. So clearly this was his version of giving it a go.
Very smooth transition there, very relevant segue. That made me laugh a lot. With the name Toxic Zombies, it kind of reminded me of Trauma film. This isn't unlike things that have been distributed by Trauma. If anybody has seen Redneck Zombies, I feel that it's very similar to this. However, I think a lot more fondly of Redneck Zombies because I think it's a better bad movie. This is a bad movie, but it is very bad. So let's talk about this piece of shit. Toxic Zombies, or Blood Eaters, is a 1980 film. The basic synopsis, well, you know, in 2 words, hippie zombies. But the synopsis that I've got here is after drug crops, i.e. marijuana, are sprayed with a chemical by a passing airplane, the growers of the crop are poisoned by this chemical and turned into zombie-like mutants. So, yeah, I mean, awful film. It's so bad, but we're probably going to have fun talking about this one.
Yeah, so this is essentially like the Technohead song about people who want to be a hippie and they want to get stoned on marijuana, and the government don't want that. So basically they create this chemical called Dromax, and they then sort of spray it on all the marijuana crops, but apparently they miss because they hire some sort of shit old guy to do it. And yeah, it turns the hippies into zombies. But again, these are very different zombies again. So these are not kind of invincible super zombies. They're just, you know, they're just normal people. So if you shoot them, they die straight away. They're not sort of supernatural beings.
God, and yeah, I mean, the plot is really basic and laughable. The dialogue is terrible. The acting is pretty damn bad. And this is the most un-PC film of the 3 in this episode. Actually has a boy in it that they deem to be a retard, who they make out to be very simple, and they give him really bad, like, lines that do not reflect well on anybody who might have learning difficulties. It's very insulting, and in bad taste. And, yeah, I mean, it's just very ropey all around, very cliche, very cheesy, and they are obviously trying to sort of play on the morals that drugs are bad, okay? So they just keep like coming back to the fact that Mary Jane or marijuana or weed or dope is very bad and you should not smoke it, and it's very much over the top, drilling that point in all the time, which, yeah, I mean, in this day and age doesn't really feel that shocking, so you can't kind of help but laugh about how they've got this big elaborate scheme to try and rule that out in the world. And yeah, it's just laughable. Not to mention that there are 2 children in this, like I said about the one that they deem to be a quote-unquote retard, which they actually mention in the film. But he's got an older sister, and neither of them look relevant to the age at all. They look a lot older. So it's 2 kids that are basically played by adults or young adults, and none of this makes sense. It's terrible. The zombies are terrible as well. So not the best film.
No, I imagine that's probably more to do with like child labour laws than anything else, because they were quite strict on those things back in those days in terms of hiring children. I don't disagree with the majority of what you've said. However, all I will say is that one thing about this compared to, and I do this a lot, and I apologise if this is boring for some people, but in comparison to low budget shit films that you get nowadays, I can tell that this is a sincere effort made by Charles McCran, who, I mean, this is definitely a passion project of his because he directed it, he wrote it, he is the lead actor in it, which, you know, hey, if you're going to, so going full like Orson Welles on this, and I think he edited it as well, so you can tell that it's like, it must be something that he wanted to do for ages. It doesn't feel cynical in that sort of shit way that films like Sharknado and things like that do, where someone's deliberately gone out there to make a bad movie. I get the impression he wanted to make the best movie that he could, and I don't think this is the worst movie that we've talked about in this series. I don't think it's very good at all.
Agree. I mean, yeah, the thought was there. I do feel, yeah, I feel like that's really sweet, actually. Go Charles. Yeah, it's kind of cute. This is his passion project. He never did another one. He probably gave up. That's a shame. He's not a terrible actor in this. He's all right, you know. He looks the part. It's just a little ropey, but he's probably taken on doing too much himself there, and he was a noob, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, this has sort of a lot of the typical kind of low-budget movie potholes, shall we say. So, for example, you've got bad acting, bad dialogue, bad special effects, bad camera work, bad editing, bad lighting, bad set design, because the interior sets in this film are really bad. I mean, this is like kind of Love Camp 7, sort of SS Experiment Camp kind of levels of kind of shit, sort of internal sets. Like when they're outside, it's fine. But yeah, when they're showing like what's supposed to be this big government agency sort of talking about like, oh, you know, we need to go there, get rid of those hippies. It's not even really clear why they need to get rid of the hippies, by the way, or why they felt the need to kind of go there themselves.
Yeah, and they've got a big old American flag hanging up there behind an official-looking desk, which is exactly Love Camp 7-esque, as you say, but just in America instead. So it's so laughably cliche, the setup. Didn't you feel like at the end he was going to fall in love with his secretary as well, which is ridiculously cliche? He like gives her a kiss and says, "Oh, you're always one of my favourites," or something.
Well, yeah, and bear in mind his wife had just died. And, I mean, let's face it, I mean, it is the director, you know, playing the main character, but the way he wrote his character, he was like the horniest man in the world. He like, I swear he had sex with his wife about 3 different times in the course of the film. The first time in a ridiculously cheesy scene where they have some kind of play fight where they start ripping each other's clothes off
That
or
was
something. I don't
hilarious.
know. It was very, very strange.
Oh yeah, I mean, you always want to destroy clothes like that when you could just remove them and not pay for new clothes. Oh my God, it's too funny. Yeah, there's like some really bad music.
Yeah, there is. I mean, the main theme of the film is a complete rip-off of Halloween. Big time.
Yeah,
Such a rip-off.
yeah,
It's not as bad as other films that we've watched. It's not like, I don't know, like Unhinged. There's no dong, dong, dong sort of going on in there. But there is a lot of very, very annoying kind of piano music, which is sort of too loud.
yeah. The
There's
opening
also,
title is about as basic as you can get. Combine that with some very basic music, and it sets you up for the entire film.
yeah, I mean, things just very quickly, I mean, things that kind of bothered me about the film or things that I found funny. So there are at least 2 occasions in this film where characters are running away from the zombies and they stop to take a drink from a stream.
Oh my God.
Like, why would you do that? That makes no sense. There's another scene where Tom is again on the run from the zombies and he's wearing sunglasses,
Yeah.
which again doesn't make sense. Why would you have sunglasses on if you're on the run? Surely you would have taken them off by now. There's a lot of really, really unnecessary side characters that are clearly there just to be killed. Like,
Yeah.
you're talking about sort of the boy and his sister. Yeah, clearly they're just there for no reason. They just happen to be there. Their parents are there just to die. Most
Mm.
of the hippies are there just to die. There's a farmer who's there just to die. It's
Yeah.
just, there's just, yeah, a lot of very, very superfluous characters to the detriment of really sort of developing the main characters more. And there's
Yeah.
also a very annoying character who is Tom's brother Jay with his afro,
Oh God, yeah.
who is a shit comedian.
Yeah, he's terrible. And the opening scene is a naked woman in the woods who's just bathing because she's camping and she's, half naked with her boobs out and just an excuse to show nudity and then to kill her off with no other use whatsoever. And one of my personal favourites, the quote unquote white trash couple, one of whom is going to be one of the guys who's going to dust the crops to kill them off because that's his job and he's not done any in months. So he gets this well-paid job and he's like, oh, $100 an hour, and they pay him to go off and do it. And he's so sexist and, just absolute white trash, treats his wife like shit, she treats him like shit. And he was like my favourite zombie because I just thought the character was just absolutely ridiculous. I expected them to even be in a trailer. They're not, they're in a house, but you get the idea anyway. It's that kind of stereotype.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, yeah, we're bad-mouthing the film a lot. I'm trying to be Mr. Nice Guy here. I'm trying to dig out positives. One thing I would say is that this film is kind of boring, but it's not full-on tedious, like my life going at 2 miles an hour sort of boring, like other films that we talked about. There's a certain amount of incident kind of going on in the film every kind of 5 or 10 minutes to stop you getting properly bored. The only thing I would say about this, and this is a very, very weird criticism to make for a film, is that it's kind of bad, but it's not really bad enough to be memorable. It's
Yeah.
just sort of boringly bad.
Yeah, I agree, actually. Yeah. I mean, it has got a certain charm. Like I say, I like a lot of trauma films, and this gave me that kind of feeling to it. It's an 80s horror film. They did actually put effort in. This is a genuine film that somebody wanted to make because they wanted to make their own zombie film. You can tell a lot of love and thought has gone into it. It just, it's not that memorable, like you say. And positives, yeah, it's got charm to it. I feel for the director and actor in this that he must have been pleased at the time, but maybe he looks back on it and thinks, God, I was terrible,
Yeah, I mean, the zombies look alright. They don't look as good as other sort of zombie films, but I thought for the budget, the zombies looked okay. They didn't look too bad. Special effects are, as you would expect, not great, particularly some of the deaths, although not as horrendous as other films that we talked about. So there's a scene where a character gets their hand chopped off. I thought that was a bit creaky, but
Yeah.
then but when the zombies are sort of attacking someone, I thought that looked okay. It was more kind of people trying to kill characters with axes, knives, things like that. You kind of showed the budget limitations.
Yeah, one thing that really annoyed me about this film and also the Manchester Morgue film is that why would these people leave their car windows open? Come on! You got, right, the first time that you get the zombies and they put their hand through the window, you fucking roll those motherfuckers up and you leave them shut for the entire film, okay? Because fair enough with the Manchester Morgue film is that they had that really shit Mini Cooper, like an old 70s original one, and they kind of have these sliding windows, so they're probably a little ropey, a little weak and not as secure. It's probably quite hard to wind them up. So fair enough with those ones, I get it, that it's probably just not the best car for that situation. There's nothing that could be done about that. In this film, they had some 80s American estate car. They just left the window open and didn't roll it up and just sat there screaming endlessly and not doing anything. And it's just like, it's just a little more effort with that, I feel, could have been made. It was a little too obvious.
Living Dead in Manchester Morgue, though, they got super strength, so they could probably break the window quite easily. In this, yeah, I agree, probably a bit stupid. But yeah.
I think they didn't want to wreck the car, even though it was a horror film, so they just saved some money on that.
Yeah, they were probably borrowing the car, so you're probably right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so really not a great film. Even, yeah, it's, as I said, it's not bad enough to be memorable, is the problem. Like, a bad film like Cannibal Terror, for example, is horrendously terrible, but I remember it because it was so funny in places. This isn't really too bad, it's just not memorable, it's just kind of low budget, bit shit.
Yeah, I mean, any favourite deaths?
Not really, to be honest.
I'm going to say the crop sprayer was my favourite, and then he eats his wife, so that was my favourite part.
I suppose, the only other thing I would say is there's a character called Phillips. Now, he's actually played by John Amplas, who is Martin in the George Romero film of the same name. So this guy clearly can act, and I don't know why he's just playing this sort of small character in this film, where he's clearly a very, very good actor. So it's a bit weird that he's in this. He got kind of bitten by a zombie. I suppose the zombies, they're foaming at the mouth and they're throwing up blood and stuff. I guess that's kind of cool in a way. But really the deaths are just sort of alright. It's sort of there. I suppose the death of the farmer is quite good, even though it happens off screen.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, nothing too exciting, but pretty good. The zombies were quite interesting at points.
Yeah, the only other thing I would say is, and again, this is probably more a reflection of the acting talent of the director, but the character didn't seem that bothered when his brother died, which I don't really blame him, to be honest, because that character was very annoying.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, he didn't seem at all bothered, did he?
No. And video nasties wise, I don't even think I really need to ask.
It's a no from me.
Yeah, that would be a no from me as well. So it's 3 no's for this show. So yeah, zombie films probably shouldn't be banned. But again, as with other films, I think if this wasn't on the Video Nasties list, no one would even be aware of its existence.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is one that would definitely be forgettable. Don't think anyone's going to be recommending this.
No, exactly. And you'll be shocked to hear it's not currently available on DVD in the UK, and I wouldn't expect that to change anytime soon.
What a shame. Okay.
So that is our show. Can you believe it? We have one more show with 3 more video nasties, and then we have reviewed all 72 of these fucking video nasties. Can you believe it? We
Yeah,
are
it's incredible.
almost there. The end, the finishing line is in sight, everybody.
Yeah.
So we can, as much as I love it, I love video nasties, but obviously with any kind of big project, it's so rewarding to get close to the finish line as we are. So I want to thank you very much if you've been listening to us since the very beginning. If you're one of the Lament configuration OGs, as I like to call you, much respect to you.
Yep.
And usual plugs for those of you who aren't aware of this kind of stuff already, but hey, you got to do what you got to do. This is the Lament configuration. I'm Greg Knox, and you can find us on our Facebook page, which is the Lament Configuration Podcast, on our YouTube channel of the same name. There's going to be some exclusive content going up there very soon. Keep your eyes on the YouTube channel, watch this space. And you can also find us on Stitcher, on Podbean, and on TuneIn Radio, and of course on Twitter at Lament Horror.
Yeah, I've been Ria Fend, resident body count girl, as always. I'm looking forward to, after we have finished the format for this show, which is the Video Nasties, revealing what we might do next. So who knows what's coming and what we're going to do. We shall keep you informed. We'll tell you about that later. Please go on iTunes and give us 5 stars for the show. If you want to write a review in there, that would be lovely. Otherwise, you can just give us a little skull emoji of death or the words Jesus wept if you are a Hellraiser fan, which indeed we are, of course. Anybody who gets the in references will know all about that. And I am on Facebook on my modelling page, which is fast approaching 70,000 followers. Thank you so much to everybody who has followed me. That's Ria Fend, F-E-N-D. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter under the same names. That's Ria_Fend. And yeah, I can't believe we're coming towards the very last review show. It's rather incredible. Thank you so much.
Yes, so like the start of this series, where I started with a very, very prominent kind of Italian video nasty, which was Cannibal Holocaust, which was a year and a half ago. Fucking hell, how time flies. We are ending the series with one of my favourite Italian horror directors, which is Lucio Fulci, the godfather of gore himself, with 3 films. And anyone who's seen a Lucio Fulci film will understand why he had so many films on the Video Nasties list. And we will be reviewing all 3 of his Video Nasties. So I look forward to that very, very much indeed. Ria, have you seen any of Mr. Fulci's previous work?
I haven't, so I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great final show.
Yes, I agree. And on that note, I'm going to leave you with a song which is taken from Dead and Buried. Now, this is by Les Brown and his orchestra featuring Doris Day, and this is called Sentimental Journey. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much.